demonstration to get the 5870 ready for sub-zero cooling. First thing we have to do is separate the card and the standard heatsink and fan. With the 5870, this is pretty straightforward. All we need to do is remove the screws on the back cover plate. From here, the back plate simply lifts straight off. We have 3 screws to remove, here, here and here, so we'll pop those out. Like so, and then we've got the retention bracket. Right, from here we need to separate the PCB and the heatsink. Now you'll find that it's quite tight. It won't come off without a little bit of working because the thermal compound and the pads are obviously sticking both parts together. So just gently work it loose and you'll see it will separate like here. From now, one last step. We have to remove the clip, should I say the wires, for the fan. And we have them separated. The first thing we're going to do to turbocharge this MSI 5870 graphics card is add a few caps. For those of you that have read the article on Tweaktown, you'll see a link going back to Kingpin Forum where a gentleman going by the name of Shimino has done a very helpful thread explaining how and why some of these mods are done. So special thanks goes out to Shimino for demonstrating how to do these mods. It's quite a difficult angle that I'm working on to be able to show you and demonstrate some of this, so I may have to go back and resolder these, but this will give you an idea of what's involved. I've already gone through and added solder, so hopefully I should be able to just go through and do some gentle touches just to get these caps to attach. Though do note, for anyone who's watching who actually does a bit of soldering work, I'll probably just take these off and redo them properly. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'll just do some light touches, just to give the viewers at home an idea what's involved. So the final product will look something like that. As I said, I'm only doing slight touches at this stage just to demonstrate how and where we put these caps. I'll now actually pop those off and put them on properly. Now that we've got the first 5 caps reattached and soldered on nicely, what we also want to do is attach some read wires. When you're overclocking and overvolting, you really want to use a digital multimeter to get an accurate readout of what voltage the different components are running at. Software is simply not going to cut it for this type of thing. So here you'll see that I'm just going to solder on a couple of wires to different read points on the graphics card so we can use a digital multimeter later on to get an accurate readout of the different measurements. Attached 3 different read points in this area. With the read wires attached, it's now time to solder on the last 3 caps in this area. Hopefully it'll go off without a hitch in this area, otherwise I will have to do as I did before and reattach them, or desolder and reattach them again, which I may well do. Effectively, this is what it's going to look like. Though those last three caps, I simply can't get the angle to do them properly, so I'll take them off and redo them off camera. But here you'll see 8 caps and 3 red wires. 2 resistors removed, 8 caps added, 10 wires added, 3 VRs later, and a Molinex plug for a read point, and the first card is all ready to go. In my previous article I demonstrated how to use a conformal spray to cover the PCB so no moisture can actually cause a short. For this article and for this particular graphics card I'm going to use nail polish. Here I simply grab my nail polish and simply paint it on. Just getting a nice even coverage, just to help seal it all up, so if any moisture does get on, there's a layer of protection so we won't cause a short. Let's carry on with that as we cover all the parts. With something like an open surface like this graphics card, I find it almost as quick just to use the nail polish instead of the spray on lacquer. When you're doing a motherboard there's so many little nooks and crannies to get into that it's faster, or at least I find it faster, simply to tape off the motherboard and spray it on. With an open surface like the back of a graphics card, by the time I've gone through and taped off the corners and the different bits and pieces, I could have just gone through and coated it with nail polish, like so. Now that all the mods are done, as well as the PCB has been covered in nail polish, I'm also going to cover the graphics card with eraser. Just like we do with a motherboard, I'm simply going to place pieces of eraser on the PCB. This will also help to insulate it from any moisture that we may get. This is not a step that you usually have to do with a lot of graphics cards. You could either just use the nail polish, or you could just use Vaseline, which would suffice in most cases. Just when I'm benching the 5870, I generally have a lot of issues with the memory cold bugging, so I often have to heat up the pot and get it to a temperature where it will operate again. Because of this, I go overboard with the insulation to make sure that the condensation that I do get won't affect the operation of the card. So I'll just continue on filling the card in with eraser. We'll do this on both sides. We'll also be placing eraser in between the PCIe slots on the motherboard, and then I'll join up the eraser so it forms a complete bond between the motherboard and the graphics card. So the ice that does build up, even if it does turn into liquid, it won't actually affect either the motherboard or the graphics card. Let's just take a minute to have a look at the GPU units that we'll be putting on our MSI 5870 graphics cards. For this article we'll be using the Kingpin Cooling Tech 9 5.0 Slim GPU units. Here you see they come nicely boxed up. I'll simply open that up. Inside we've got mounting brackets, the 2 pots, the assorted screws, we have the units themselves, and some insulation to go around. In this article I'm going to show you a couple of times how to mount a GPU pot onto a graphics card. This first time I'm going to show you with the card and the pot uninsulated so you can easily see how it all goes together. Kingpin Cooling has done a fantastic job in designing these pots, as well as their mounting system. Here we've got one of the brackets that comes with these units. As you can see, it has 3 different holes for different graphics cards. All you simply need to do is add screws through these holes to match up with the holes onto your graphics card, mount it on, screw it down and attach the pot. Here we'll grab the screw, we'll simply wind it through. As you can see, it comes through, so when the bracket is mounted, we've got the screws that will go through the holes in the PCB. So from here I'll simply add the others. When we come to mount the pot, when it's all insulated, we'll also have a thermal probe attached. This thermal probe will feed through the gap you can see just here and next to the plate. And this will measure the temperatures so we know what kind of fluctuations in temperatures we're seeing on the core. Now that we've got that all screwed through and mounted, we'll grab our PCB and simply line it up and attach it through. Here we just grab our nuts, wind it on, and the GPU pod is mounted. Very, very straightforward, and as you can tell by this design, with different plates will fit a myriad of different graphics cards and different graphics cards in the future. An excellent design. Now that we've got all the eraser on, it's time to mount the pot. Here you can see a couple of different stages of the insulation on the GPU units. Here with nothing at all. Then I've wrapped it in tape and also mounted on the thermal probe, and then I've added the insulation. From here we'll mount the GPU unit onto the graphics card. Let's move these out of the way. First, what I'm going to do with my graphics card, I'm going to do a test mount to make sure that the thermal compound will spread evenly. So I'll put a wee dab just in the centre there. Remember, this is just a test mount. From now, we'll line up the graphics card and the unit, poke it through. Instead of screwing it on, I'm simply going to force it down with my fingers to simulate using the screws. So when I separate the two, I can see how the thermal compound has separated. Here you can see I've got a nice even coverage on both units, so I know that I'll have a good seal. Now that we've got everything set up, let's fire it up and have a look at what we're running. For the base of this platform, we're using the EVGA 762 4-way classified motherboard. On that, we're using a i7 980X CPU with 4 MSI 5870 graphics cards and Corsair GT Dominator memory. Cooling the CPU, we've got a Kingpin Cooling F1 Extreme liquid nitrogen pot. Cooling the 4 MSI 5870s, we've got Kingpin Cooling Tech 3 at the end here, a Tech 4 in the centre, and 2 Tech 5s at this end. Powering all this is the Antec TPQ 1200 OC edition. For overclocking, we use a combination of software and also the EVGA EV bot. Software will use Elite for the motherboard, as well as the MSI overclocking afterburner tool for the 5870s. We'll also do some on-the-fly overclocking on the motherboard utilising the EVGA eBot handheld overclocking tool, which you can simply scroll through different menus and select either voltages or base clocks, and you can alter them on the fly. Now that we know what we're running, there's one other tool I need to show you. With this particular CPU, we'll encounter a cold bug at around about -160 degrees. When that happens and the computer crashes, it will not start again until the pot's been warmed up to approximately -110. Once in Windows, we can then continue cooling down to -160. And to help us warm the pot up, we'll use a propane gas torch. For this, I'll simply remove the plastic cup that I'm using to help contain the liquid nitrogen while pouring. We'll use our propane torch, ignite, and we'll use that to warm up the pot. Otherwise, it'll take a considerable amount of time for the ambient air temperature to warm up the pot, a lot longer than we prefer. So this type of rig, a propane torch, is an absolute must. While we're overclocking the graphics cards tonight, we're going to use the MSI Afterburner software to increase the voltage, the megahertz on the core, as well as the memory. If I zoom in here, we'll be able to see the main parts of the software that we'll be utilising. We've got at the top here the voltage that is going to the core. We can simply use the slider to the right to increase it. Below that we've got the core clocks. Again, just slide it to the right to increase. And down the bottom here we've got the memory. For the overclocking that we're going to do tonight, I'm going to use the relatively safe voltage, under liquid nitrogen that is, of 1.45 volts. The core is going to be clocked at 1200 megahertz, and the memory at 1240. And once we've set that, we simply push apply, and that will set that voltage and megahertz across all cards. Another tool that we'll be utilising tonight while we're overclocking is the EVGA EV bot. The simplest way to show how useful a tool this is if I zoom into CPU-Z, and hopefully you can see we're currently sitting at 5464 megahertz. I'll simply increase the B clocks to 170 with just a couple of clicks, and we can see that the megahertz is increased on the fly to approximately 5.6. We increase it by another 4 base clocks, it jumps up again by another 4. You can select any base clocks you like. I'm just doing in small jumps. Here we have at 5925. We'll jump up to 184 base clocks. And here you can see we're at 6056 megahertz. With only a few clicks of the button, and incredibly simple. You can also change voltages, PCIe frequencies, a whole raft of settings. Here I'll just jump up again to 188 base clocks, and we're at a nice easy 6.188 gigahertz, and we can carry that way on all night long. A very simple tool to use. A cool feature of this particular motherboard is the ability to shut down the unused PCIe slots. Here I'm running a 3D Mark Vantage, but instead of running all 4 cards, I'm actually only running 2, leaving the remaining 2 cards still all set up in its slots, but with no power actually running to those cards. We can leave them there without any risk of doing damage. The motherboard has got a very handy set of jumpers, as you can see just in here, where you can simply disengage whichever of the PCIe slots you wish. A very handy feature when benching multiple cards.